I think Mercedes has figured out how to connect electric motors with internal combustion engines, because here we have the SL63 hybrid. It's the brand new Mercedes SL and it has 805 horsepower. It's just insane what we can do now when we combine these two power sources. So what we're gonna do in this video is, of course, talk about this fantastic powertrain that we have in the SL63, and then I want to talk about this design from a front, side and rear with the top up and the top down, as well as the interior, because I do think we still have that slight angle on the infotainment screen on the interior. But first of all, let's have a look at this article from Car and Driver and let's see what this SL63 hybrid is all about. So we have 1,047 pound-feet of torque in this. Just nuts to think about. You have 805 horsepower, as we talked about. This monstrous output comes from a twin-turbo 4-liter V8 paired with a rear-mounted electric motor. And they say that the SL63 SE Performance, as it's called, arrives next year and should cost north of $200,000. And I think that price point is pretty much expected when you have this type of technology and this type of power in this car. So the SL still sits below the 803 horsepower, 1,082 pound-feet of torque GT63 and the S63 in the AMG hierarchy. Mercedes claims that the SL63 SE Performance rips to 60 in 2.8 seconds, but they do believe that it's actually quicker than that, since the standard 577 horsepower SL63 goes 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. And if you think about it, 577 horsepower compared to 805, that is a massive difference. So I do believe as well that it's probably faster than 2.8 seconds in a big, heavy SL. I mean, that's just crazy. Then you have the electric motor power can also be sent to the front axle via the all-wheel drive system if more traction is needed when wheel slip is detected at the rear, which I do believe. I think that's probably going to happen a lot. The electric motor itself is mated to a 2-speed transmission, a limited slip differential, and instead of having maximum driving range as the focus for this electric motor, they had the focus on rapid power delivery, which I think most customers for this type of car would want to have as well. So they don't know the range, how much range this gets on purely electric, but it's probably not more than 15 miles. You have 4 levels of regen braking. The most powerful one, you can use this as one pedal driving, meaning you can drive it as any other full EV. There are a couple changes that you can see that this is the E-Performance if you just look at it from the outside. For example, you see this little cutout here, which when you see it, it can't kind of be unseen. It has a weird location to it, but this is actually where the charging port is located. I would probably much rather have it be located here than in the rear. You have 20 and 21 inch wheels. I would probably go with the 21s, which are these ones right here. You have rear wheel steering, fantastic for the turning radius. A retractable rear spoiler helps with the downforce. You also have an aerodynamic package, which I do believe I would probably add to my SL63 if I were to buy this, because I want to have all the aero and all the performance stuff. Since this is the top of the line, I want to have it be as Mercedes intended it and as good as Mercedes can make it, and that means probably adding the aerodynamic package here. And of course, 805 horsepower, that means that you need to have some proper brakes. This comes with ceramic brakes, 6-piston in the front end with 16.5-inch discs up front. And the pricing, as we talked about, the normal SL63 starts at $188,000, so that's why they think that this will be probably above $200K. So let's have a look at this design here. Now, the SL is very, very, very special to me, because the most beautiful SL of all time, and I've been thinking about this for 20 years now. I don't know why I think this is the most beautiful SL, but that is the R129. The Bruno Sacco, the legend, the genius, designed the R129. Came out in 1989 up to 2002. It went through a bunch of changes there. My favorite are the later models with the AMG package, with the AMG monoblock wheels. It's just a stunning, stunning design. When you look at it, there's really nothing special about the design. It just looks like a roadster, one of those extra roadsters that you have a need for speed. If you were to design a cruiser-style roadster, it would look like the SL, the R129. And I can't put my finger on what it is that is so magical about this design. And now we have the new one here, the 2024 top of the line 805 horsepower SL63. So let's have a look at this design. I've talked about this design when it first came out. I just hit my elbow there on the chair. And I made a video on this, what I think about it, and I still have the same feeling about these headlights specifically. Because if you look at the front end, it's not a, you know, it is still a pretty beautiful design. We do have this frowning grille like we have on pretty much every single Mercedes model in 2024. Instead of having the smiling grille, the more gracious grille that we had before, we now have the upside down grille, which is totally fine. It still looks good. But what I think clashes really badly here is, look at everything here in the front end. How we have all these organic lines and fluid motion, specifically here in the lower end, curves everywhere. There's not a single sharp line anywhere on the front end of this car. I do like that we have the carbon fiber right here looking beautiful in this section. I do believe this is maybe the aerodynamic package. And then have a look at the headlights, just how sharp they are. It's like a small little, or actually a big triangle. And this is what clashes with everything else in the front end. We don't have a curvature here. We don't have a radius here. We don't have a radius in the back as well. I do believe that if we were to put a couple of small radiuses in these corners, it would flow better overall with the rest of the graphics in the front end. It would just make, it's something that to me just would make perfect sense to have something like that. We can still have this piece right here that sort of cuts in a little bit and creates this corner piece and almost like an eyelid for the headlight. That's totally fine, but that doesn't mean that we can't have radiuses in the corners of the front end. Now looking at it from a side view, both with the top up and top down, I think this is one of these cars. I think more and more convertibles are getting much better in at this than 15-20 years ago, is to look good with both the top up and the top down. And I think the Mercedes does an absolutely fantastic job looking gorgeous with both the top down, as you can see here, and also the top up in the lower section. We do have a couple of key lines, specifically this key line. This is pretty much the only sharp line going down there in the bottom, because we don't really have a shoulder line here. And what that does, when you look at this, specifically like this from a side view, this has a very similar style to the Porsche 911. And I think it's coming very, very close to looking almost too much like a Porsche 911. With these very slim taillights in the back, we don't have any sort of defining lines in the side of the car, and that is also something that Porsche has done forever. They never had a sharp shoulder line, and that now comes back in the Mercedes here as well. But I do love these wheels. It looks like to me that let's see if we can zoom in and check out what size tires these are. It's too pixelated so we can't see it, but just looking at it like this, it looks like we have the same size front and rear, and this is what I want to see in all new cars, and this is something that BMW is not doing now. They're always putting in their performance cars, pretty much every single time they're putting 21s and 20s in the front, or 20s in the rear and 19s in the front. Here it looks like we do have the 21-inch wheels all around the car, and it looks so much better just proportionally. It doesn't look like a Hot Wheels. And this is the area where I wanted to see the charge port, since we have on the, not sure if you can see it in any of these pictures right here, we do have the fuel cap. So I just wanted to have the charging port maybe located here. I'm not sure if that is some user test that they made, like how long the cord is, where the best location for charging in a garage would be, and that's how they came up with the rear position of the charging port. But it would just look better if we have a symmetrical fuel cap on one side and charging port on the other. So looking at the rear end, and here you can clearly see this Porsche 911 vibe. At least I'm getting a very strong Porsche 911 vibe when I'm looking at this. I do like this color. This is one of these manufacture Mercedes special colors. We still have the very sharp design of the taillights like we have in the headlights, but for some reason, and the weird thing here, I can't justify the reason why I think this, but for some reason I think the taillights, even though they are sharp, and as you can see, everything in the rear end here is also very organic and also very round and curvy. We don't really have any sharp lines in the rear end. But as I said, these taillights, for some reason, I think they fit better in the rear with this clash that we have of the taillights than they do in the front end. And it bothers me that I can't tell you why I think that. I probably need to think about that for half a day and then I come up with a reason for it. There you can see the charge port right here, but I do wish it did have a more structure in the rear end, so not have this slope. You see this roundness that we have here? This is way too much Porsche 911. I want to have this stick up more, like have more of a defining endpoint for this Mercedes. And I keep coming back in my mind to the R129, just how beautifully boxy that is. And I don't necessarily want to have the exact same styling as the R129, but just a little bit more connection to that instead of having more of a connection to the 911, if that makes sense. So last but not least, looking at the interior here, and I like this interior. I had the GLC for a week with this sort of screen and climate control settings that we have in this SL as well, and the same 6-degree angle of the infotainment screen, which I thought was gonna drive me nuts, but it actually didn't while I was driving the car. And I do believe that we still have the angle here. You can't really see it from this specific angle if it has this 6-degree angle to this side. I do believe it still has that angle, and I do wish that they just made this symmetrical and static and centered in the middle. But what I like here compared to more affordable Mercedes models is that in this and in the, I do believe they put it in the AMG GT Coupe as well, is that we do have a screen here. You can see there's fully digital, probably a 12.3-inch screen, but now we have a housing for it. So we have these wings here on the side. You can see they covering up like on the sides, creating this bracket around the gauge cluster. And just a simple detail like that, that's all I'm asking for when it comes to the integration of the gauge cluster. Just put something around it to make it a little bit more upscale, a little bit more cozy for the gauge cluster. But I don't know, the gauge cluster to me is something special. That's where you see, it's your visual connection to what's going on with the car. So I want to have that sit deep inside of the car and not just be like the infotainment screen. And I think Mercedes did some sort of compromise here and added at least a couple of brackets around it. And even though it's just a couple of brackets, it still makes a big difference to me when it comes to the integration of the infotainment screen. If you want to go and check out my review of the GLC, I talk a lot more about this new Mercedes style of interior. I'm gonna link that down below in the description. Love the Mercedes steering wheel. I don't know how many times I've said that before, but this just looks, I love what Mercedes is doing with their wheel design. Look at this gorgeous wheel right here, and also the interior when it comes to wheels and the steering wheel. Looking very nice with this burgundy, is this burgundy? Is sort of a brown reddish interior with the green exterior. Give me some naturey, foresty vibes. I think it's a really great spec, this specific SL that we're looking at right here. And as you can see, we don't have any sort of physical buttons anymore, but probably, should I just stop talking about that? Because I don't think it's gonna come, I really hope it's gonna come back, but I feel like physical buttons is a thing of the past and stuff that only luxury brands do now. For example, Bentley, Rolls-Royce, because those customers understand what it means to have a separated manufactured piece to adjust every single control instead of having to be pixelated. What do you feel feels more classy? Having those analog adjustments and controls, or just have everything, just outsource it to a software developer to put it into a screen like this? Personally, you know what I think. It's always going to be physical buttons for me. Overall, this Mercedes SL63E AMG S Performance, turning Mercedes SL into a almost a supercar with these type of numbers. 805 horsepower, 0 to 60 in about probably 2.5 seconds or something like that. It's just going to be a crazy beast of an AMG. And honestly, when I compare the good old comparison, BMW, Mercedes, I think Mercedes is having a bit of a upper hand when it comes to specifically the performance, AMG and the M division. I'm leaning more towards AMG, not just because of the drivetrain, I mean 805 horsepower, but also the design. I think Mercedes is currently nailing most of their designs, and they've been doing that for a while now. And they also have a clear identity across the entire lineup, something that is lacking seriously in BMW these days. So I can't wait to hear what this beast is going to sound like.